Welcome, welcome, welcome to the living room where we listen, learn, and live together. I'm your host, Richard Martin. Make yourself right at home. I'm glad you're here. I would like you to do me a favor. If you're driving, keep your eyes on the road and hands on the wheel. You'll still be able to do this. If you're sitting in your living room, if you're on a run or a walk, got the earphones in your ears, you'll be able to do this as well. Do me a favor. On the count of three, let's all smile. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Yeah. Don't you feel better? I hope that you do. That's our effort and aim here in the living room. Beyond that, I happen to know, based on personal experience and observation, that a smile can say 1,000 words. Now, when's the last time you've smiled? Who made you smile? What made you smile? Our special guest specializes in smiles. That's right. She is a dentist. But more than that, she is a woman who is a business owner and an educated relational expert. She's looking at me like, did you just call me a relationship expert? Yes, I did. We've had many conversations. I happen to have met her by way of my wife, and we have been able to develop a friendship over the years. I'm grateful to have Miss Eijah Holness in the living room. Eijah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Not a problem at all. Thank you so much for accepting and for being willing to talk. One of the reasons we have the living room is to capture conversations that I was always having and already having, and would say, man, I wish that was recorded, because, you find yourself going in and out of, nuanced angles and perspectives of conversation. I'm always learning from other people. And in the conversations that you and I and Kai have had over the years, it's always been very thought-provoking. It's almost like taking a diamond and spinning it around to look through, let light shine through different panes. And so because of time, we're not going to have the opportunity to go as deeply as we normally do. But that's okay. I like to keep some things public for the living room and then other things private. But I do think that people will be able to get a sense of your story, who you are, and what it is that you do. So let's kind of begin a little bit at the beginning. Where's home for you originally? Where are you from?
I am from Jamaica, Queens, New York.
Okay. Awesome. New York, strong.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, you actually have family roots in the Gullah Geechee culture. Right. Have you spent some time down in the Carolinas at all?
Yeah, I lived there for 7 years. Really? I actually moved to Charleston, South Carolina when I was 7. Mm-hmm. I moved back to New York when I was 14. So I was steeped for a time in the culture. Yes.
So for those who are not familiar with the Gullah Geechee culture, my first introduction to it, believe it or not, was years ago as a child. My favorite Nickelodeon television show. You know where I'm going. Gullah.
Yes.
Right.
Uh-huh. I believe that was in Beaufort, South Carolina, which is not too far from Charleston, a little further south. Mm-hmm.
So how would you summarize and capture the Gullah Geechee culture for those who are not familiar with it?
Well, it's island culture. My folks are from the Sea Islands of South Carolina, Johns Island, Marmalade Island, and the Low Country area of South Carolina. These are, for those who may not be aware, Charleston is where most slaves are known to have entered the country during that period in history. And for those living on islands, just like the islands of the Caribbean, in which I also have roots, the island nature of it, I guess, created an incubator, I suppose, for the culture. And so a lot of it is left untouched. Gullah is the language of the people, in the same way that you have patois, in Jamaica, you have Creole in New Orleans or in Haiti. Gullah is a language unto itself.
Right.
And so it's a big part of the culture, and it's a very rich culture. So I'm proud to be of that lineage.
I really do respect and admire the historicity of the Gullah Geechee community and culture, that there is an intentional effort to storytell, to maintain the roots. And, from Ron and Natalie Dice, the leaders and creators of Gullah Island to, even just going and doing my own research, looking on YouTube, following the culture on Instagram over the past few years, even through them. I've always been impressed by how close of a contact and connection has been maintained with not only African roots, but like you said, Caribbean roots, and for it to be America, you know, and, the further west you go and maybe even north and south, sadly, there are many people who just don't know. That's why I'm grateful that you were willing to give us a snapshot, a summary of, well, Gullah Geechee, is that in America? Very much so in America. Real culture, real people, real roots and heritage that is very much alive and well. So I think you might be actually the first person of Gullah Geechee heritage that I've met personally. So this is cool. Go ahead.
Well, it's alive, but I don't know that I would say that it is well. It's under threat. It's under threat because, with gentrification and with integration, a lot of the culture is under threat. The language is, I don't want to say dying, but it's not. It's a much smaller group of people that comprise, the culture. It's there, but it's not in the way that it was for so many generations. It's been infiltrated, it's been dispersed. Yes. And so it's just not quite the same. As the younger people move away and become more educated and separated from the core community, there's not been, I don't know how to put it. It's under threat.
Sure.
And also the land is under threat with the laws that have been structured to deprive people, and as we know, that look like us of property. My great grandfather acquired the land that my family now sits on in the 1880s.
Wow.
But because of laws that were set up, to take advantage of the people, a lot of land has been lost. Not just in my family, but throughout the culture. So I would say it's right.
No, and I appreciate that very sobering clarification, because it does then have even wider contextual realities with the American narrative, or portion of the American narrative, which is, it seems like a buddy of mine just visited Tulsa, Oklahoma, and went on the Black Wall Street tour. And he said it was very inspiring and enlightening, but of course, a great portion of the story was kind of just harrowing, because, at some point you want to say, why couldn't boundaries be respected? And just people be left to thrive and grow and discover on their own. And so that's a very necessary and helpful clarification, alive, but under threat. I think many people, whether or not they have been made aware of the Gullah Geechee culture today, or if they have already known about it, would be able to resonate with that. And I would encourage us to, go and discover more about it. It is not just Gullah Geechee history, it's American history. And so when American history is under threat, when this culture's community and history is under threat, American history is under threat as well. And I think we all be mindful of it. It's interesting that you mentioned land, because having lived in the Southern Virginia area for 4 years now, you often hear people talk about that same thing, that even in, here it is now, 2021 at the time of this recording, and there's still land battles, land wars, that, whether we like to talk about it or not, have some very real racial and people group implications. Power constructs and power plays are often done behind the scenes. Sometimes it's just the onslaught of phone calls that come into a particular neighborhood, offering sizable portions of money to buy people out of their homes, and saying, hey, can we buy your house? And they'll name a price. pretty much knowing based on market and area research that most people might not have ever heard that kind of price point before and would be very attracted to take it, but would be essentially giving up their land, right. And having to go fend for themselves somewhere else so that a specific place can be transformed into another person's vision. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I think we must continue to think about and even find ways to partner with those who are making efforts to preserve. Yeah. And that's just one avenue of change, preservation. I do think that there are others who are investing energy necessarily in kind of opposing and resisting efforts to make inroads that would essentially rob land and impact a very real a staple of American history.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you grew up in New York, spent a portion of time down in Charleston, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. After South Carolina, you go back to New York, right?
Yes.
Okay. At what point along your journey do you kind of have some early inclinations towards your current profession as a dentist? When does dentistry become an interest of Eijah Holness?
When I had braces, when I went to the orthodontist. Yeah. I would go and spend a few minutes at a time in most cases, over a span of a couple of years. And it was a pretty nice little setup. I saw my orthodontist move from one suite to another down the road. It was a nice little upgrade. And I was like, man, I knew that every time I left, my mother stopped at the desk and left some money. And I wasn't there really long. I was like, man, this is a nice little arrangement here. I didn't know, So that was when I became interested in dentistry in particular. I always knew I was going to be a doctor.
Okay.
I always knew. Okay.
How old were you when you had braces?
I was 16, I think, when I got them. It was the end of my junior year in high school. So, and then when I went to college, just some of the things that I learned. Thank you, Dr. Paul. Some of the things I learned. It was an attractive.
Sure.
It was an attractive profession to me.
I had the chance to go to a program this summer after my junior year in high school, Minority Introduction to the Health Sciences at Loma Linda, MITS. Mm-hmm. And, you're exposed to virtually all of the health science options. Some of them are more hands-on, but by and large, you get exposure to all of them, at least in theory. Mm-hmm. And one of the ones that was hands-on was dentistry. We actually were able to go in and create you got to help me with the language, whatever you use for the molds. Impressions. There you go. We were to make it, mix it, and then actually do it with one another. And they almost persuaded me, if I'm being honest. I was like, yo, I too have history. I got braces early on. I mean, I might have still been in single digit years, right before you're around 10. Had those on, went through the retainer journey. Prior to getting braces, had to get some teeth extracted to kind of make the way for that. Interesting dental story. And I'm grateful for it now looking back. But, I just had a long relationship with my childhood dentist. And even as an adult, we maintain a relationship with our dentist. But childhood, that was, I can see it like it was yesterday. This dental office had, believe it or not, an old red VW Beetle in the lobby. And I mean, as kids, we would climb in and out of that thing. They had removed the doors, of course, removed all the under the hood stuff, but it was just the perfect living room, lobby staple. And that's what Dr. Fernandez, unfortunately, he passed away some years ago, but that's what his office was known for, the big red VW. And I just think that was from a marketing and maintenance standpoint. I'm sure a lot of parents had no other choice but to stay with him because the kids were like, we want to go to Dr. Fernandez. We want to go on the VW. And he was excellent. And so, yeah, I almost went that route. So I really have a huge appreciation for dentists. I was going to ask this question after the next one, but I think I'll ask it now. I think one of the things that maybe was somewhat of a form of reservation for me was I heard that it's a high stress job and that sometimes, that stress can lead into like some other stuff, like, just some challenges mentally. This is what I heard. And I was like, well, it can be so stressful. So since we have you, tell us, like, what are some sources of stress for the dental life?
It is very stressful. Very high alcoholism rates, suicide rates. Dentistry is both a trade and a profession.
Okay. Come on now. Come on. Help us.
It's hands-on, right? So, in the way of carpentry, in the way of, being an auto mechanic, it's a trade.
Yeah.
And it is also a profession. It's a medical profession. And there are all of everything that comes along with medicine and the practice of medicine, plus everything that comes along with a trade. And then you mix in the fact that the very well-known fact that many people, I should say, are afraid when they're afraid, and they make it known. Many folks, as soon as they walk in the door, I hate this. The first time you meet a person and literally the very first thing they say to you is, I hate the dentist. And you're like, oh, well, it's nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you too.
And, this is what you're with. And so that fear shows up in a number of different ways. Some people are belligerent. Some people cry. I've had people sit in front of me in tears. I've had people sit in front of me and it shows up in a number of different ways. And then on top of all of that, many dentists are, like myself, business owners who have received no training in business. And so you're trying to manage a staff and stay afloat with everything that comes along with entrepreneurship and with everything else I said before. And it isn't for the faint of heart. There's a lot to learn and there's a lot to overcome and to deal with. So, yeah.
So I never thought about that, that by and large, most people are afraid and they show that in various ways. So how do you build trust with your patients?
I try, I am myself. So you know me enough, well enough. I'm myself. And so I try to just establish a genuine connection as early as possible and to get to know something about the person. So, I'm not treating a set of teeth, but a human being with real needs and desires and expectations and fears and experiences. And so if there are fears, we try to establish that in the beginning and to determine where they came from. Was it a childhood experience? Was it, was it an adulthood experience? Was it, a lady told me just last week that she was molested by a dentist.
Wow.
And so, understanding a little bit of background. Are you a parent? Are you a wife? What do you do for a living? What is your, what brings you here today? Is it your occupation? Is it, what? Having that kind of understanding helps to shape the rest of my approach going forward. What is it this person is looking for? And how can I help to create the best outcomes? And then also being honest, listen, I may not be the best dentist for you.
Yeah. Being able to have that honest conversation up front to give them the opportunity to make an informed decision.
Yeah. I'm going to be me.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work for you, then, you might be served elsewhere.
Do you have, or have you had resistance that you could perceive as being rooted in you being a Black woman?
A lot of folks come to me because I'm a Black woman.
Okay. Gotcha.
So there's that. There are people who come in with their prejudices and or their preconceived. I don't know what they think they're coming in for or what they think they're get. I told you I'm me all the time.
Yes.
So you got the wrong one, it's just the sooner we establish, I'm sorry. you you must not know about me.
Yeah, New York coming out now.
Probably better served somewhere else. And it's just as simple as that. The sooner we can
Mhm.
establish it, the better. My staff knows, some people come in and they're difficult.
Sure.
Some people come in really disrespectful. And, you can't tolerate that. If not just for me, I can handle it, but you're not going to, beat up on my staff or, what I mean? And so you just kind of have to make it known. No, not here, not today.
Now, in your research and in your experience, help me out. I've always thought that oral hygiene and dental health was isolated to kind of your mouth, but how is it connected to other parts of your body?
In this country, and you're not alone. So in this country, we're not made to appreciate oral health. We're not taught very much about it. And so it is very possible to make it all the way to and through adulthood, not understanding that your mouth is a part of your body. What a novel idea.
Yeah, eureka, right?
And the implications of that, it's no more separate from your body than your hand, your foot, or any other part. And so people come in all the time and say, oh, they're just teeth, pull them out, thinking that that's a normal thing or that's an acceptable thing. I mean, what other part of your body would you find to be so dispensable? Or would you?
Whoa.
Right? If you talk about amputating a finger, most people, but we're so willing to part with teeth. We think it's normal. It's not. There's nothing normal about it after elementary school or, those elementary years. I mean,
Sure.
So oral health is very much a part of health. It's not separate. It's linked, and studies are showing, more and more studies all the time are being released showing the connection. The oral systemic connection is what it's called.
Okay.
We know that problems with your gums, periodontal disease, is linked to cardiovascular disease.
Wow.
We know that is linked to diabetes, to systemic inflammation. You got arthritis, trying to figure out why you haven't fixed whatever's going on in your mouth. The same vessels that run from your teeth are running through your body, causing, those diseased, it's the same inflammatory reaction going throughout your body. It's rooted oftentimes in your mouth. And there have been studies done that have shown that in like 50% of heart attack patients studied, they've opened up the heart and found bacteria that are specific to periodontal disease, which is gum disease, which means it can only have come from one place.
Whoa.
Most people aren't aware. And, you hear of people that have died out of the blue from a heart attack. Oh, they were pretty healthy. And then they give you, this person ran marathons and this person, well, what was the inside of your mouth looking like, And we haven't bridged that gap. Now more than ever, physicians and dentists are beginning to work together to address this problem and create better outcomes. But if you're
No, continue. My apologies.
Yeah, but if you're dealing with health issues, you can't get to the root of it, and you haven't addressed your mouth, because it's not something that creates pain. Really far gone for most people. Most people don't consider it to be an issue. Like I get people all the time that come in and say, well, I haven't had any problems. I had a gentleman, I've had more than one gentleman in the past month where it's been their first dental visit in life. One was 42 and 22. Sure. And they said, well, I haven't had any problems. And I say, well, how do you know? If you haven't been to a dentist and there's been no one to diagnose, how do you know you haven't had any problems? Of course, they both had lots of problems.
Right.
And so, but because it wasn't painful, they didn't see it as a problem. And I can speak from experience that there are lots of diseases, deadly, that don't manifest with pain. as a primary symptom.
Woo!
So,
You're preaching. I don't know if you know it, but you're preaching. and you're preaching good gospel in the sense of good news for us. It's amazing because as you're talking, I'm even thinking about how a part of why I might have disassociated oral health with whole health. Not that I didn't prioritize it. Thankfully, my parents, they educated us in the ways of oral health from the home. They made sure that we went to dental appointments. Like I said, they saw my dental direction was going one way and they said, okay, he's young enough to kind of course correct. I was able to see my father get braces as an adult. So we were exposed and made aware, but even still, the dental office was on this side of town. The hospital was on that side of town. Maybe a doctor's office of a different kind was on that side of town. So even like location wise, I've never gone to a hospital and it's like, who do you need to see today? And a dentist is a part of that option. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you could, even from what you said earlier, it's a trade and a profession. It is in the medical field. That raises awareness. That raises education to say, you know what? I mean, my part was how you said, man, the blood system that operates in your entire body also feeds your mouth, like the gums, the teeth health, tooth health, excuse me, your tongue, all of this, everything, right? And sometimes I'm sure I'm not the only one who's sat in a dentist's office in the chair and they tell you to raise your tongue and they're looking underneath and, kind of checking the sensitivity of the roof of your mouth. And you may say, well, what's the point of all this? I thought it was just
cancers.
Yeah.
There are cancers
it's amazing. Like a lot of people wouldn't know that. They would think it's just about teeth. And what you've said to us is, hey, it's way beyond teeth. There's so many implications that actually have to do. It actually gives me even more, how they say life and death is in the power of the tongue?
Yes. And I say this also, something that people don't realize is that even if you see a physician regularly, they are not trained in oral health.
Wow.
They are not trained. And the majority of them have very little more knowledge than you do. So the average person has the dental IQ, if there was such a thing, of like a 5-year-old.
Wow.
And that
even adults.
Yeah. Wow. Well, let's just pop quiz real quick. What do you know about oral health?
I know that after, like you said, our elementary years, our permanent teeth come in, and that help me with the range. Is it like we're supposed to have 32 teeth?
Yes.
In a full sense, right? I know based on being taught how to brush your teeth that you should brush 2 to 3 times a day and floss at least about that, or if not half, at least once a day. I know that
you're doing way better than most people right now.
Yeah, bad breath can begin on the tongue, so but that's honestly maybe about as far. Like if you ask me to start identifying molars and canines and all that kind of stuff, I might kind of get lost, but it ends pretty much around there.
And most people will not go as far with you on that and don't realize that it's important to floss every day. Or you said how to brush, and I don't know who taught you how. I never learned to properly brush until I got to dental school. I thought I knew.
Yeah.
I thought I knew, but so yeah, and even physicians, and I know because I have a number of them as my patients, and I sit in, groups online with doctors of all types, and you realize, oh, okay, okay. So if you're counting on a physician to educate you in that realm, it's not likely to happen.
So would you say that a lack of access is prominent in the United States of America? And I'm wondering if that's the next logical step. Like if there's limited awareness and education, then does that translate into either by way of a person's own volition, like most people don't feel the need to, or are there some real disparities at work that prevent people from accessing, consistent, viable dental care? Have you seen that to be true? Is there any literature that supports that?
Well, it's both. I mean, by and large, there's There are certain groups that are going to be, and we know who those groups are,
Sure.
the same groups that are at a disadvantage when it comes to almost everything else.
Mhm.
But dental health, by and large, is not a priority in our society. So I was in the 4th grade or so when the Clintons took office and Hillary Clinton came on the stage talking about healthcare. And since that time, there's been healthcare, right? In the laws and legislation in the news, right? How many times have you heard dental health mentioned in any of
Yeah.
that discussion?
Yeah.
Right?
That's real.
It's not a part of our consciousness in society, in America. And so it was a luxury. My mother never had, do you think she had a toothbrush until she moved to New York as a child?
Wow.
She was 6 or 7 years old, right?
Right.
So, access was an issue. And so habits that are taught, you just don't, access is an issue.
Right.
And there are people for whom in this day and age, even in the United States, access is still an issue. We do thankfully now have in many places free healthcare for children, which would include dentistry. But, there's in many places we don't.
Do you know of organizations or do you have peers in the dental arena that are seeking to remedy that or respond to that? Or would you say most of us are doing it out of the overflow of our own practices? Or are there other, initiatives that saying, listen, we got to change some things?
I mean, there are organizations out there. The National Dental Association was founded and exists to address disparities in oral health, education, and access. And there are initiatives that have come about as a result of tragedies that have taken place. When I was in dental school, a young man died by the name of Diamante Driver right here in the DMV region, right in PG County, of a dental abscess that spread to his brain. And because of that, a lot of legislation, began to come about, to help to alleviate the access issues. But unfortunately, his story is not an isolated one. It's not an uncommon one. So.
Yeah. I don't research this like as a hobby, but whenever I come across, television programs, documentaries, or little articles that might explore mummification and forms of burial throughout the years, and if they're trying to research, it's amazing how they will target the mouth and to see if teeth are still, redeemable, and to study, what was the oral hygiene realities and practices of people who lived in whenever, however far they date the bodies back. And so it's crazy because if persons who study, cadavers and dead people, if they exhume bodies and study the mouth of the dead and can find things you would think it would translate to like the living, probably need to have research done on the mouth as well. And so we could continue on because I have so many more questions, but I want to get to you as business owner, right? Because I don't know if you would say, hey, 90% of dentists are their own bosses, or if that is kind of not the case. But I just want you to kind of in your own way, kind of bring us up to speed in terms of what led you to say, you know what, I don't just want to work for somebody else. I want to have my own practice. And then 2, share with us, a few lessons that you've learned along the way. Has it been easy street? Was it as simple as choosing a name, picking the carpet, and then you're off and running? Or has it been a little bit more circuitous than that?
So I want to be very clear. I never had it in my plans to open an office of my own. In my mind, I only saw headache. God told me to do it. I'm obedient, or I try to be wherever possible. So here we are. And it has been headache. It has been tremendous. It has been tremendously difficult. What was it? What were redirect me with the question, or bring me back to what the question.
You're right on it. Just to share lessons. What has been difficult about it? Where have you gained, even though it's been difficult, you're still in it. So I can imagine you can share some lessons with us that, hey, here's how I've learned to build a business. And then here's some things that have translated into strengths for me.
So I think I approach business in quite the same way as I do other parts of my life. One of my core values is personal development, right?
Okay.
And so that spills over into professional development. What you learn when you get out of dental school, you have this amount of information, this amount of knowledge, this amount of education. And then what you do after that is your business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I've committed myself to continuing education. There's what's required, which in my state is 30 hours every 2 years.
Okay.
But I have committed myself to, learning and growing. And so I, for one, years ago, I attended a class on mini dental implants, a course. And that was actually among many other things that pointed me to, I guess, on the path that I'm on now, which is opening my own practice so I could be able to do and perform that procedure. Incidentally, I'm headed up to back to that same place tomorrow evening for still more education. That was 8 years ago, is what prompted me to start the practice, and I'm still learning, So that's and then also on the professional side, just learning business. It's not something that's taught in medical school, dental school, most professional schools, and so there's that as well. And I've also spent a lot of money learning the business side of things.
Wow.
How to be an executive,
Right.
how to work with staff, how to, that stuff isn't easy. You're dealing with people, the patient, that's not easy, but dealing with employees isn't easy either.
Right.
So,
right. So talk about that some. How have you learned to lead a team, to embrace and maintain, the organizational culture you've envisioned? How have you learned to do that?
With great difficulty.
Okay.
My greatest challenge. I can't say that I've mastered that.
Mm-hmm.
I have not.
That's real. That's real. And I appreciate that.
I mean, it's something that, I'm daily learning. Okay. I think this way. It doesn't mean that, Keisha at the front desk thinks this way.
Sure.
I've been exposed to this. It doesn't mean that this one over there has had, and so how can I translate what I now know to inspire this person, and bring out the best in them,
Yeah.
Some days it's easier than others. Some days I'm good at it. Some days not so much. Like, man, I could have done that better. Could have said that better. Are my expectations realistic? These are my daily struggles on that end. The dentistry for me comes way easier than that side of it. So,
right. No, I have no doubt that people can resonate with that. Leadership, I think, effective leadership at times has been put in the category of whether or not a person is what we would call a natural leader, natural born leader.
Yeah.
But I think far more of us have to learn leadership. And after we are invested, like you said, with the tools, the information, theory of whatever it is, including me being a pastor, that you're left to continue to learn and research. Well, what does it mean to address and attend to the business aspect of leading a church or just leading change? That people are complex, right? Like we know that, but when you are daily interacting with a diverse group of people, whether like in your instance, your employees or your patients, and the mix between the two, man, it can at times be even more stressful because it kind of takes away from or interrupts. Like you said, I like doing the hands-on work, but man, the people aspect and leading change and, having to have and learn to have critical conversations to kind of course correct when there's a time. That can be very challenging. Or even this, for instance, when the pandemic hit March 2020, were you nervous as a business owner? And what did you share with your team when that happened? Because
Listen,
dentists were impacted like everybody else.
I remember telling my dad in the weeks leading up, because I was I'm not a big news watcher, but I remember a friend texting me something about what was going on in China. It was a few weeks before, and just little things I would get like via social media or whatever. And I was just like, this is not gonna stay there. Like, I have studied some public health and epidemiology and whatnot. I said, this is not gonna stay there. And I said, I remember saying to my dad, I could see us having to close for a while. And he was like, you think so? And I was like, yeah, I do. And I was actually up at the same place I'm going tomorrow. I was up at the mini implant headquarters the week before. And I was like, let me go back a day early. And I started buying groceries and stuff. I'm like, and I had the weekend to think about, what am I going to do in the practice? Because while I was up there, the doctor was walking around saying the NBA just shut down, and Andrews University had just shut down. My little cousin texted me, she was coming home, and I just remember thinking, okay. So Monday morning, I sat the staff down and was like, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to work from home. We're going to close, because speaking of infectious disease, there is no profession at higher risk for contracting COVID than the dental. There is none.
Yeah.
What we do is aerosols all day, every day. Prior to COVID, we were the only people wearing masks, right?
That's true.
With good reason. And so I understood that. And I was just like, yeah, there's too much unknown. We're going to have to close. And so they were talking about 2 weeks at the time. I had in my mind 2 months. We ended up being closed about 10 weeks.
Wow.
Yes.
Was that, what were the 10 weeks like? I mean, there's only so much work I can imagine you can do from home, because
I appreciated it. I was happy for that break. It was daily. There were companies that daily offered continuing education. I'm talking about 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. If you wanted to, you could have just devoted that entire time just to education. So there was that. I mean, you couldn't. It was just too much. But there was so much learning to have been done, and it was free. But then also thinking about, how am I going to restructure? A lot of people spent the time trying to figure out how are they going to do things differently once return to quote unquote normal, or what if they never do? And so, there were, if you can recall, PPE shortages. We were asked to give our stuff over to the our medical counterparts, physicians, whatnot. And it was hard to get, and the prices went up. So a lot of time was spent trying to source what we were going to need to just go in when we did go back in and do our job. So when they did open back up, it was like, okay, well, I don't have, this, that, and the other. And we weren't using N95 masks prior to COVID, so things like that. I put a washer in washer and dryer to the office, and, just how am I going to come out of this now? And then also, how am I going to do things differently? Because the way I was living before, I don't want to work that many days a week. Yeah. It's not good for my mental health. So, that's what I was doing. Just trying to figure out what my life was going to look like on the other end.
When you reopened, what was the patient response? Were people waiting at the door, or was there turnaround time?
Somewhere.
Okay.
People were cautious. The thing is, there are always going to be, and there's always emergencies. And I did go in during those 10 months. I did go in on occasion when there was an emergency to be treated. But it looks different now. But part of it is by choice. I never had a problem getting patients in the door. You know what I mean? Sure. They were always, so it was a matter of, how can I dial back? The hardest part has been the staff. Like I still don't have a full-time hygienist.
Wow.
Hygienist was unable to return to work because of her obligations with family and children. She had been on maternity leave and was supposed to have come back the day that we closed. But COVID. And so, and that's just not my story. It's across the dental field. And so there's a shortage right now of working hygienists, which is, it's kind of like a big deal.
Very much so. Very much so. in more ways than just the obvious, like more ways than just them being dental hygienists, but even in terms of the culture that you sense of a place, in many ways it's transmitted through the hygienist. You know what I mean? Before you see the actual dentists. And so I hear that loud and clear. Talk to me, if you would, about mentorship. Have you, in your time as a dentist, become a mentor to others who have expressed interest in dentistry? And have any of these mentees become dentists?
Yes, actually. I mean, in a sense. So I don't have like one particular person that I work with, or one particular mentor or mentee. I try to, wherever possible, drop whatever gems I have learned along the way and to pick them up wherever I can. I've belonged to mastermind groups where I can just glean wisdom and knowledge from others who've walked the path before me. There's one young lady, I'm proud to say, and I now get it, what other people must see when they look at me. But there's a young lady I first met when she was about 5 or so, when I was volunteering at Vacation Bible School in my home church. And just really bright kid. And I was a teenager, I guess. And at some point she told me she wanted to be a dentist, and she ended up going to Oakwood like I did. And she ended up getting into the summer program that I went to, that I recommended that she apply for. And she ended up getting into the University of Michigan for dental school, and she just graduated and is a doctor now. And to have watched, and now I have some idea of, the sense of pride that people must see looking at me. I get it now. Yeah. The importance of, reaching back and pulling up somebody behind you. So just, I try to make myself available for, people who have questions, younger dentists, dentists my same age, and dentists that are older that may not have learned the things that I learned because technology wasn't around when they came in school. You know what I mean? It's just being a part of community, I think, is important to me. And that's my biggest contribution.
What I love about you is how you don't tend to disconnect one thing from something else. And you said it earlier when you said, when I serve my patients, I'm not just attending to their mouths, I'm serving people. And whether they're a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter, a firefighter, a police officer, a lawyer, a fellow physician, or whatever, they are a whole person, right? They come with fears, they come with perspectives and positions and the like. I know that you've shared with us before that as a child, you face your own health challenges, right? And I'm wondering, in your estimation, I'm not sure if you think about it like this, so if not, that's fine. But, do you feel like how you approach the whole person in what you do now is in any way connected to you having experienced your own health challenges? Share with us what those were. And, as a child, how did you navigate that as growing up,
So what he's talking about, y'all, when I was 14, I was diagnosed with AML, which is acute myelogenous leukemia. Leukemia is a cancer of the white blood cells, which impacts your immune system, basically. In order to, it ravages your immune system. And so I underwent chemotherapy, radiation at one point, bone marrow transplant. I worked with a Chinese herbologist in alternative medicine, and here I am. I think that, so I didn't know it at the time, but there was a point where I was given just weeks to live. It's been 23 years. At no point was it in my plans to die. And so I think, I was thinking about this. I guess I knew what the stakes were. I knew that it was at 14. I knew that this was a terminal illness.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it never occurred to me that I would die. Like that was just not in my plan.
Right.
And it's not to say that you can plan. I guess I refuse to entertain that as an option. I want to say that. I guess I'll say
Sure.
that. And prayer changes things for sure. And I was very fortunate to have prayer warriors all over the world that were interceding on my behalf. But I look at things now as I looked at things then, like whatever the statistics might suggest or whatever the odds might be, like, what does that have to do with me?
Wow.
Because the God that I know,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like I don't. So there are things that I realize that I don't even entertain. I think that's a particular strength of mine. And I don't know if it
Mm-hmm.
comes from that or whether that was just in me then as it is in me now.
Right.
To where the God that I serve is a God with a pretty decent track record of defying odds.
Yes.
And, so that's the way I tend to approach things. And
Right.
I'm only now realizing that that's not as common as I thought it was. Yeah. So.
I mean, at 14 years old, for a 14-year-old who isn't up against a terminal illness, the teenage mentality and perspective to life can be far less mature and courageous. Add on to that the very real prospect. I mean, I don't even know how I would have heard that, not just from physicians, but from my parents who might have tried to make it more palatable. That could have been.
My parents knew not to let me know that.
Okay.
Which is another. I mean, they had the foresight to. So the doctors told them that. They never told me that. Okay. I knew that leukemia was a fatal illness. Like I knew that. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I knew people. My dad had a friend who was diagnosed the very same week I was of another form of leukemia, who died a few years later. There was, while I was in the bone marrow transplant unit, there was a boy a few years younger than me that came in a few weeks after me and never made it out. I knew it was a possibility, but I never acknowledged that it was a possibility for me. It just my mind just never went there.
Sure. Yes, I remember becoming aware. This might sound a little funny, but it might just be more so like, I guess I get that. When I was in 3rd grade, that was the first time I was made aware of the fact that children could die. Mm-hmm. I just didn't know that, didn't think about it. I mean, the few times in my short life at the time that I've been exposed to someone passing away, they were very old, like great grandmother, older people in the church. Yeah. So I just had no, children play, they come to school. This is kind of how life goes until a 6th grader, one of my peers' elder brother, actually got leukemia as well. And it began with him kind of having, I don't know what his particular form was, but having headaches and kind of having some vision challenges. And so when they went into it, they found that this was the case. And I remember like it was yesterday, the school, small Seventh-day Adventist Christian school, being gathered together. We're going to pray for this particular student. And, you just think, okay, he's going to be fine. And it's kind of a weird, almost inexplainable feeling because as a 3rd grader, you're still having your mind impressed by experiences. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I had a whole file of, things to reference, say, how do you grieve? As a 3rd grader, you're like, what do you mean he's not coming back to school? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And so as I'm hearing your story, I'm very much in touch with that. And it's just like, yeah, that didn't have to go the way it went. I'm definitely glad that 23 years later, you're here, you're alive, active. And I appreciate you helping us to see like how that very, real experience, that wasn't play. This was like, no, for real. Procedures were done, therapy, treatments. And I don't care how old you are, it's exhausting. Yeah. But that, it could have been a different way, not just in terms of the mortality, but even your quality of life by way of maybe just how you processed it. Like you could have easily been like, man, forget this. I'm just going to stay at home the rest of my life because you never know. But that you finished high school, went to college, went to dental school, and here you are now. And I can definitely say, based on our experiences together, that you do kind of have like a "who says this can't be done" mentality. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I don't know any other way.
That's real. That's real. That's real. The final thing I would like you to do is just share with us the name of your practice for those who might be in the DMV area or be moving to the DMV area or know someone there and they say, hey, go see this, go see Dr. Holness. Where can they go?
I'm at Bowie Dental Wellness, Bowie Dental Wellness in Mitchellville, Maryland, at bowiedentalwellness.com.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Doc Eijah Holness, thank you so much for your kindness. You have been great. I appreciate you being willing to take us back, bring us here, and to give us a lot that we can look forward to going forward. Listen, everyone, that's all we have for this episode of The Living Room. Our special guest has been Dr. Eijah Holness. She is a dentist, but way more than that. And I hope that you've been able to take the principles that have emerged in this conversation that you've listened to, learn from them, and apply them to your lives. There's more to your smile that I'm sure even you thought of. And I thank Dr. Holness for being willing to help us out there. Until next time, I'm your host, Richard Martin. Continue to listen, continue to learn, and continue to live. We'll see you next time.